This video is for A-level economics and it's the AQA paper 3 and we're going to be focusing on the 2022 series. So just a reminder about the AQA paper 3 for economics. You've got 30 multiple choice, you've got a 10 mark to extent, you've got a 15 mark explain and you've got a 25 mark justify. Now I've already done videos on the 10 marker and the 15 marker for this 2022 paper. This video is going to be specifically looking at the 25 mark justify. So the question was, after considering extract D and the original evidence in extracts A, B and C, would you recommend that the UK government provides financial and other support to companies involved in the production of commercial aircrafts? Justify your recommendation. Now, in terms of this question should be the point where you know the situation that's been presented to you inside out. You've already done the 10 marker, you've done the 15 marker, that will have directed you to certain extracts, so you'll have good understanding of those extracts. And then once you know this question, you can go to, for example, the following extract, such as extract D, and again, get a good insight in terms of how this might help you to answer this question. You might need to quickly skim read extracts A, B, and C again, just to get a good understanding in terms of what you could use for this answer. Hopefully, for your 10 and 15 marker, as you've been planning your answers, you've been annotating the case study anyway, so there's annotations that might be useful. So what AQA have been doing recently with this paper 3, they've been asking similar questions. So this question is pretty much asking you, should the government allow it to be a free market? And if not, why not? And if they are, why will the government help this industry? And what will be the consequences? Will these consequences be positive? Will they be negative? If they're negative, will it cause the allocation of resources to be even more inefficient than previously they were? So in other words, government failure. So this question is pretty much saying, is the market failing? If there is market failure, governments then should intervene. But if the governments do intervene, could it cause government failure? So let's have a look at the mark scheme. So what we've got is the descriptor for level 5, and as it says in bold, sound focused analysis and well-supported evaluation. So let's focus on the well-supported evaluation. First of all, to get into level 5, you need to be evaluating throughout. If you don't evaluate throughout, you're going to really struggle to reach level 5. So what I mean by evaluating throughout, I don't mean just offering a disadvantage, which has nothing to do with the initial argument. Even a counterpoint is not quite enough. A counterpoint is on the right lines, but it's the evaluative language and just weighing up what the question's asking that'll help you with this. Now, when you make an argument, at the end of that argument, think, will this argument always be the case? What does this argument depend upon? Has timescale got anything to do with this? What are the consequences of this argument? And that'll help you to start to evaluate throughout. By the end of these arguments, you should have a balanced argument, and therefore it allows you to be in a very good position for that final conclusion. That final conclusion enables you to offer weighted justification. There is no right or wrong answer as long as you justify it. And you should have already identified issues with both arguments anyway. So this might even be a point where you could offer solutions as well. So what we've got, and I've mentioned this before, but when we're looking at applications, so if I go back to the descriptor, as it says here, it includes good application of relevant economic principles. Well, when we're looking at the extracts A, B, C and D, it'll be surprising how much information it provides you. And those clues help you to drive your analysis. Now, what you shouldn't be doing is you shouldn't be picking information from the case study and then just storytelling. They should be evidence to then bring in your analytical arguments. So in the next couple of slides, I'm going to really show you how much information you can get from the case study. So what we've got here is the first argument. Let's leave it to the invisible hands. Let's leave it to Adam Smith's invisible hand in the free market. So what evidence in the case study suggests that we could do that? Well, first of all, Boeing sales, they've suffered. The 737 MAX obviously had the safety concerns, but it's expected to recover. In fact, Ryanair have ordered 75 more. Why? Because they've negotiated a discount. That's pricing mechanisms at play. That means that Boeing's obviously got excess supply, so it's provided a signal to them that they have to lower their price. So straight away, we're looking at, well, Boeing, if that helps, and then they start to drive forward, then again, they didn't need government intervention. It just needed them to follow the pricing mechanisms. What we've got is the development of new, more efficient aircrafts, such as the Airbus A321XLR. It's got 30% lower fuel consumption. Now, if this had nothing to do with the government, and this is all Airbus, then again, do you need the government to intervene with, for example, the environmental issues of this industry? Or are they actually starting to clean up already? Are they starting to innovate and realise it might not be the government that's just putting pressure on them? It might be pressure from consumers. It might be pressure from airlines. And if that's the case, then they are forced to act in an altruistic way because of their own self-interests, because of that profit incentive. And then as it says here, yes, it is susceptible to economic shocks and cyclical fluctuations, but the growth of the industry will resume. So yes, it will experience shocks, but it will bounce back. So again, does the government really need to be spending money on it? But there are also clues about government intervention as well. So as it says here, it's helping the industry to remain competitive and develop new technologies to reduce the environmental impact of air transport. So we could argue, going back to the last slide, has this green technology, has it been too slow? Or actually, has Airbus only been able to do it because of government support? We've got also the sector employs over 120,000 skilled workers, and this is the key bit, mainly outside London in the southeast. So what that's referring to is potential market failure before this of maybe regional inequality or maybe immobility of labour, but the government has come in and they've supported this industry, and what they've done is they've encouraged employment outside of London and southeast, which are prosperous, and they're looking at other regions where there has been regional inequality. So if the government then withdraw that support, what might happen? We've got, if there is genuine market failure, then surely state aid can be justified. And that's what it mentioned in the case study, and that's evaluative with that respect. Right, but when governments do intervene, sometimes they make the matters worse, and therefore government failure. And there are often unintended consequences. So again, what clues are there? Well, it says that firms are becoming too reliant on state aid, so it's reducing the incentive to increase productivity and competitiveness. It says that. What I did notice when I was marking this for example, not only for the exam board, but also in mocks, some students would use that, but then just kind of move on to the next point, and they don't really analyse it and show why they're becoming too reliant and what's the issue of that over-reliance, and I will explore that in this video. The unintended consequences in terms of international tension. So by governments providing state aid, it's distorting comparative advantage, and that's causing the WTO having to intervene and tariffs occurring. So we can see problems there. If you didn't subsidise, if you didn't intervene, then it'd be more liberal, it'd be more free, and we might not see this tension. Right, so what structure could you have? This is one example of a structure, and I'll do another one in my model answer. But first of all, point one, why should it be left to the free market and guided by the invisible hand? Point two, but why might that result in market failure and therefore government intervention required or not removed? And number three, unintended consequences causing government failure. So these are like my analytical arguments. And then what I've got is my overall judgment. So which one's more likely, market or government failure? Is the current allocation of resources efficient? If so, is this because of government intervention? Should it be removed or remain the same? What will happen if it's removed? Right, so on the descriptor for AO2, it does mention about good application, and the good application is not just about looking at the case study, it's also about diagrams. Now, there's nothing in the mark scheme to say that you have to draw a diagram for a 25 marker, but I really, really believe that you should. For me, it's an expectation that you do, because it offers that good application. Because what happens is you can use a diagram to apply it to the given situation, what's in the case study. So for example, saying that the government they might become too over-reliant on the government, well, we could draw a diagram for X inefficiency then. And this is where obviously a firm is producing less output than it could with the same inputs. And government subsidies can cause this. So fair subsidies can reduce the need for firms to be efficient. If a firm knows that it will receive a subsidy regardless of its performance, it may have less incentive to cut costs or improve its production processes. So that's its actual cost at X, but actually there is the attainable cost that maybe without the subsidy, it would push them into obviously being more efficient. So we could use that. Or there's lots of clues about negative externalities. Now, some students, when I was marking this, were doing it in terms of production. For the left diagram, you need to look at it from a consumption point of view because the aircrafts are being consumed. Now, the production of one aircraft, that's a one-time affair for that one unit, but it's when they're bought from the airline and they continue to fly. Obviously, for every flight that aircraft makes, think about the pollution that it's given off. So I would be looking at it from negative externalities in consumption, and make sure that you highlight what the deadweight loss is or the net welfare loss. Now, again, when I'm talking about applying, well, we know that one of the ways governments are intervening is via subsidy. But actually, in this case study, it kind of suggests that the subsidy has a criteria, and that subsidy and that criteria is greener aircrafts. And therefore, actually, what we want marginal private benefit to equal marginal social benefit 1. So in other words, there's going to be a shift of the marginal private cost because of the subsidy. And what we've got the new market equilibrium at P1Q3 showing that actually the negative externality that was previously there has been eradicated because of the new technology that's coming into the market. Think about the subsidy itself. I mean, what you could do with this diagram is you could change the argument based on what you want, because this is subsidy incidence. So this is a good evaluation point in terms of, well, does it depend on the price elasticity of demand, for example? Who is going to benefit more? Is it going to be the producer? Is it going to be the consumer? Or you could just simply look at the cost of the subsidy. So obviously the government is spending a substantial amount. What would be the opportunity cost? What could they be spending that money on? What's the impact on their budget deficit? Right, so let's have a look at a model answer now. Now, what I've highlighted in red is key information from the case study. And what you'll also see that I referred directly to the diagrams. So I'm going to go for 2 externality diagrams, so as it says there, as shown in the diagram on the left and on the right. Now, feel free to pause the video and just give this a quick read. So you've seen these diagrams already, but I'm going to use those diagrams and I'm just going to put them next to each other as a side-by-side diagram. You'll be surprised at how productive you are at drawing these diagrams when you do them side by side, because you've already got you already know what you're going to be drawing, and as you're already drawing one diagram, it doesn't take long to draw the next diagram. Then here we go. I mentioned about, for example, the marginal social benefits equal to the marginal social costs. Now, it's really, really important that when you draw a diagram, it's not a floating diagram. And what I mean by that is it's not embedded within your analysis, because otherwise it's pointless. So you have to make sure that you do apply the diagram to your analytical argument. Then what we've got is another point about as to why it might be causing market failure, or why it might protect from market failure. And again in red, 120,000 highly skilled labourers, primarily located outside of the affluent London and South East regions. So again, feel free to pause. Then I have to think about, okay, but is it actually needed? And what I've talked about is the UK has a comparative advantage already. They've got, okay, maybe not in aircrafts, but in aircraft parts such as engines, wings and advanced systems, they are highly specialised. And there's a need for 38,000 new passenger aircrafts, which means that those components are going to be needed. And again, I've mentioned about the A321 XLR. Again, does that suggest that the government doesn't need to intervene anymore? I've also mentioned about government failure in terms of them being overly reliant on state aid. And that's where I bring in another diagram. So consequently, this lack of incentive to reduce costs may compromise the firm's overall productivity and competitiveness. And then I also talk about the distortion of comparative advantage. With the tension of the US and the EU, does the UK want to obviously bring that to themselves? and then I've got my final judgment. And even in my final judgment, I'm still using application. I'm still talking about what's happening in the situation. So I've brought in, for example, the Chinese, the subsidized aircraft that is making the market more contestable. And I've said, well, actually, if other countries are supporting, then are we going to just sit there and do nothing and not help our industry as well? I've also said the fact is, it's not just a subsidy. This is an aerospace sector deal. So there's more to it than just subsidies. It's strategic. So because it's so strategic, it probably reduces the chances of government failure. So I've weighed it up that point, saying actually it's probably less likely for government failure. Now you might be looking at this and thinking, this is a lot to write in the time frame, but again, it depends what you're targeting. If you're targeting the top end of level 5, then I've seen such answers. All right, I've seen them in mocks, I've seen them in from the exam board, and they've all been done in time conditions. So it is possible. If you're looking at that and thinking, I'm going to struggle, well, think about your current 25 markers that you've been writing for your paper 3. What are you maybe missing out on? What could you adapt? What could you apply? Are you evaluating throughout? Could that be something that you could bring into your answer? Are you using the data enough? Are you drawing diagrams? Any of those are going to massively boost your marks.